Over 1,500 people died on the Titanic, but the worst deaths weren't in the freezing water. They belonged to the ones who never made it off the ship. This is Josh with the Infographic Show, and today we'll see how long people actually stayed alive inside the Titanic after it sank. They called the Titanic the Ship of Dreams, but on April 14, 1912, just before midnight, it turned into a nightmare. Of the countless people on board who met their end, the vast majority were never found. Only 337 bodies were found, leaving just over half of the passengers completely unaccounted for. No one knows exactly how they met their end, but it wasn't pretty. And they all have one thing in common. As the screech of ice tearing through the metal filled the ship, their stories all end the same way. Jacob is a wealthy businessman from New York, returning from a business trip to London to discuss a textiles deal. As a first-class passenger, he has been enjoying fine dining and hobnobbing. And as the alarms blare across the ship, he is one of the first people to the surface deck. But he's not looking for a spot on the lifeboats. As a 72-year-old man, he can't bring himself to take a spot from women and children. Instead, he is assisting with the evacuation and hoping that there are some spots left toward the end. But he doesn't know it yet. The ship already has chosen how he's gonna die. Not everyone on board has good intentions. Jones managed to win a steerage ticket from a friend betting on the horses. It's just as well. His debtors and the cops were closing in back in Liverpool. A fresh start is just what he needs. He's been subsisting on terrible third-class food since the start of the voyage and stealing what he can. As a man with a third-class ticket, he doesn't really have any chance of getting on a lifeboat right now. But when the chaos and confusion escalate, maybe he'll be able to snatch a spot. But for now, he's got some empty cabins to raid. For Jones, the Titanic isn't a disaster, it's an opportunity, and that makes him even more doomed. Second class was the pick for working-class passengers who wanted a taste of comfort, and for James and Melissa, it was worth the splurge for their honeymoon. Leaving Ireland behind for James's new job in New York, they expected a smooth, relaxing trip, but it wasn't going to happen. Although Melissa, as a woman, might have had a chance to get on a lifeboat, she refused to leave James, and he does everything he can to help keep her spirits up. And for a moment, it almost works. But not everyone scrambling for a way off is a passenger. The crew had difficult choices to make too. Terrence has worked countless ocean crossings as an engine technician. It's hard, miserable labor, but it pays better than anything he'd find in London. And as the lower decks fill with freezing Atlantic water, his blood runs cold. There's only one thing to do: keep everything running as long as possible. He can only hope that the company packed enough lifeboats, but he's not optimistic. And soon the ship will go from endangered to doomed. After 3 hours of evacuation, the lifeboats are exhausted, and with them the patience of the people on board. Only a fraction of the passengers have evacuated, mostly women and children from the upper classes. James and Melissa have made their way to the deck and they're pleading for a way off, but they're quickly pushed away by the other passengers, all wanting the same thing. Suddenly, the ship begins to tilt, lifting in the air as the massively flooded bow of the ship can no longer sustain the water within. Hundreds of people begin to slide helplessly across the deck, James and Melissa amongst them, and for many of them, a watery death awaits. In April, the water was a deadly cold at around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Someone could survive a fall into it, even swim once the initial shock fades. But out here, there's nowhere to swim to, and you can't last long in conditions like this. Hypothermia sets in fast, violent shaking, slurred speech, confusion, drowsiness, muscles locking up, then organ failure. For most adults, they have roughly 30 to 40 minutes before the cold fully takes over, if they're lucky. But the people aren't that lucky. They're overcome by cold. They have nothing to grab onto, and they're not able to keep themselves above the water. They flounder, sink quickly, and drown, their bodies lost to the ocean's depths. These are many of the victims who were never found, as their bodies disappeared under the waves. However, some bodies drifted on the currents and were eventually located as far away as Nova Scotia in one case, at which point they were eventually repatriated back to Ireland. But for some, debris offers a glimpse of hope. As the Titanic begins to rise out of the water, James and Melissa scramble across the deck. Bodies rush past them, falling into the water. Melissa freezes as a family, husband, wife, and 2 young children scream as they drop into the darkness below. She shuts her eyes and prays, but there is no time to wait. James grabs his bride and hauls them toward the stern. They clutch a railing just as the ship shudders, shaking more passengers loose to their watery graves. James heaves Melissa over the rail, and from high above the freezing Atlantic, they can only watch as the unsinkable ship begins to sink. Elsewhere, time is running out. Terrence was never one to seek a quick way out. A man goes down with the ship after all, but with death closing in, he's ready to see if evacuation is still possible. First, one last sweep of the bow. It's flooding fast. Icy water pools around his knees as the ship tilts at a sickening angle. He's walked this route countless times. He just needs to be sure no one is trapped down here. The cold is biting and deep, but Terrence is a hardy man. For a few seconds, he thinks he can still get out. A sudden surge of water blasts through the bow as the ship lurches. Terrence is thrown into a hard metal wall. The torrent pins him in place as the front of the ship slips under the waves. In seconds, he is fully submerged in freezing water, clawing for a way out of the darkened space. But there is nowhere to go. The compartment floods completely, and then the Titanic's bow disappears into the bottomless dark, taking Terrence with it. And the second the water closes over his head, time speeds up. Steerage has been a goldmine for Jones. The small-time con artist has already pocketed cash and valuables from the other cabins. Now he just needs to reach the boat deck. Maybe he can grab a baby, sell the sob story, and cheat his way onto a lifeboat. Surprisingly, there is no water up here. Jones rushes toward the stairs, only for his heart to freeze in his chest. He's face to face with a steel gate. It was designed to stop the lower-class passengers from getting to the upper decks, and in a panic, it must have been forgotten. Jones knows there are still people trapped down here with him. He avoided those rooms. Now he can only slam his fists into the bars, shouting into the dark, and for a second he thinks someone might hear him. Then the ship tilts hard. The floor yanks out from under him and throws him into the wall as the Titanic shifts from horizontal to nearly vertical. The stern starts its slow descent into the Atlantic. Jones scrambles, twisting around for anywhere safe. He manages to wrench open a closet door, slipping inside. It's a refuge, but for how long? Jacob has no such delusions. As an old man, he is at peace with his fate. His family will be well cared for. He's helped dozens of people off the ship before the lifeboats ran out. He is at peace with his God, and he's content to spend the last minutes of his life talking with him. As soon as the chaos of the evacuations has lessened, he retreats back to his quarters, a spacious room in the first-class cabin. He closes the door and waits for the end. As the ship pitches up, he tightens his grip on the nightstand, and a little light from the window outside is dimmed. He doesn't have long to wait. It only takes minutes for the ocean pressure to reach the hull. This part of the Titanic was never built to withstand it. The window, meant for peaceful ocean views, goes first. A sharp crack fills the air. Less than a minute into the descent, the glass gives away. Water explodes inward, and the pressure starts tearing the room apart. In an instant, Jacob is slammed by a chunk of debris, and everything goes dark. When water hits you at this speed, it doesn't feel wet, it feels solid. James and Melissa are still perched high above the water, hanging onto the railings. They're fighting for a way to survive, for a future they haven't even had a time to start. James grips Melissa's hand, promising her everything will be okay. Screams carry through the dark, coming from the lifeboats. They can barely make out the shapes of the people huddled inside of them. But if they can see them, it means they're still close. It means there's still a chance. Could they swim to them? Not from up here, not yet. But as the ship sinks lower, the distance shrinks. If they wait long enough, they might be able to drop into the water and make it. It would be brutal. The Atlantic is freezing. How long could someone survive in the freezing Atlantic? Hypothermia starts to settle in almost immediately, but it might be the only opportunity they have. James keeps telling himself that. Just wait. Just hold on. But they won't get a chance. The ship rocks violently. Melissa's grip slips and she is thrown over the railing. James lunges forward, reaching out for his bride. He catches her, but it comes at a cost. He is hanging perilously over the edge, one hand clutching Melissa's, the other locked onto the railing. His muscles ache. Every sinew is screaming, but he can't let go. And then he feels it. Melissa's hand is slipping. Sweat, the cold air, fear. He begs her just to hold on. She looks at him, eyes wide, full of tears, and then she falls. James watches her plunge into the dark maw of the ocean. Before she hits the water, he looks away. He has to. His body trembles, racked with raw grief and despair. He closes his eyes. He sees his bride on their wedding day, and then he lets go. Jones has sealed himself away in a closet, desperate for any refuge, and it works. He has created an air bubble that's airtight enough to prevent any flooding. He's safe from the rushing waters, but in his doomed box, survival is measured in minutes. As the massive stern sinks below the waves, the pressure increases massively. Jones waits in complete darkness as the air compresses around him. His ears pop, and it becomes harder and harder to breathe. The pressure in his head builds, and it feels like his eyes are going to burst out of his skull. And then, like a flash, it all ends. Within 90 seconds of the ship sinking below the waves, cracking can be heard all around. Jones clutches his head, barely able to stay conscious. There's no time for a last breath. The hull ruptures, and in a split second the massive water pressure rushes in and crushes anything inside. Jones and anyone else who was unlucky enough to still be in the Titanic is hit with over 6,000 psi, more than enough to rip the stern open as its descent to the ocean floor continues. Nothing inside could survive. The collapse of the Titanic's stern was so loud that people on the surface, in the lifeboats and clinging for dear life, could hear the ripping of the metal below. The Titanic didn't just sink, it continued to kill people even after it disappeared under the waves. How did people survive this doomed ship? Check out real Titanic survivor stories that will shock you, or watch Why Cruise Ships Don't Sink to discover why this tragedy will never repeat itself in the modern day.